Hello there, and today I'm going to be going over how to play my version of Global War 1936 to 1945. Obviously, I'm keeping a lot of rules from the... Obviously, I like to keep the feel of the game, so I have a couple rules in here. I guess just take a look at those real quick. Excuse me, the ones I still have from HVG. I have a couple of ones that are obviously important for reference, like the Italian campaign and Venetia, which we'll talk about in just a second, and the Chinese Civil War, which again, another important event. The Vichy French, that's going to be another important, another important event whenever Vichy French, or if Vichy France is formed. We've also got how the French Navy is split. We'll talk about that in a little while. But for now, let's go over the beginnings. I guess I'll just read some of my rules. The year is 1936. The Nazis are rising. Japan continues to threaten the Chinese warlords. Spain is in the middle of a civil war. And this is Global War 1936. In Global War, you'll command 1 out of 9 countries. I'll explain that in a minute. In a series of rounds. The actual war will not start until 1939, when Germany will be at war with the United Kingdom, France, and Poland. Now, with the introduction, I can now tell you what exactly you're going to be doing as a player. As a player, you'll be commanding, depending on how many people you have, you'll be commanding different countries. Generally by the same alliance. Now, I have my alliances laid out right here. I actually have them laid out right here with the roundels. But I have the main alliances set up right here. So, top row have the Allies, middle row have the Axis, and the bottom row the Comintern. Now this is just the extra stuff that I couldn't really fit in here. Some of the majority of these are actually neutrals until it is decided. This is the National Spain roundel and is part of the Axis actually. We'll talk about that later. But for now, let's do a brief overview of each country, starting with the United States of America. Now, the United States is split in two. What I'm showing you right now is the eastern half of the U.S. So obviously you have so let's talk about what's over here. So obviously is the American capital, Washington, D.C. You also have the Panama Canal, another important piece over here. But there's not much else over here besides the industrial heartland of the United States, which will be around right here in the heartlands. And since the United States is split into 2 different countries, you'll probably be into 2 different sides of the map. Being America would be a little bit difficult, but you would have to cover. It would be difficult, but you have to. But it would be easier to split up what's for what front of the war, if you do choose to play as America. Now America over here is the Pacific side. Over here is Hawaii, right here. The American fleet, which is not as big right now. The way I have it set up, I have, I believe, 1 battleship, 1 light cruiser, an aircraft carrier with a mix of bombers and fighters. And I've got 1 guy in Alaska. But that's essentially America, what you start out with. Now let's take a look at the United Kingdom. Here, the UK is set up. Sorry about the noise. The UK is right here, obviously. Let me set this down while I talk about the UK or the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is one of the largest players in the game, so you have a lot of ground to cover. But the way I have my game worked out is I decided to split it up a little bit. I found ways to sort of divide up the countries a little bit. Not the countries, but the colonies, really. So this is the heart of the UK. Obviously really close to Germany. We'll get to Germany in a minute. But right here you have your startup for the UK. So you got a couple of infantry and aircraft. You get a couple of land units and naval forces down here. And you get Border Ireland. But that's the main part of the UK. Or the United Kingdom. There's a lot of other places. So I guess since we're here, we'll talk about Canada real quick. Canada is a puppet of the UK. It's a part of the UK, but it's separate. So to show this, you have the colonies right here, and then the rest of it is the puppet government. There's more over there in the Pacific side of things. There's more over there, but there's not a lot. There's practically nothing over there to look at except for the except there's only one infantry there. So that's Canada, and they have their own separate income. So not a lot to look at for British colonies in the Latin area, Latin America. I do have British Guyana, Trinidad, Jamaica, and the Bahamas. That's all. And then there's a rule book. They do have the Falkland Islands, and in Antarctica they do have that claim. Seriously, unless Argentina gets involved, there's not a lot to worry about right there. Well, over here in Africa, it's a different story. In Africa, you have. Oh, sorry about my voice. In Africa, you have the Italians. You have the Italians up here in Libya. You also have them at the beginning of the game, you have them in Somaliland and Eritrea, but they're most likely going to take over Tunisia. And then we also have South Africa. Again, another important piece, but I guess I'll talk about Egypt and South Africa right now. Egypt and South Africa are not a part of the base game, but I put them in to break up the UK into different sections to control. Egypt has this area, so when you play as the UK, you'll have different segments of your playthrough. So you'll play as the normal UK, then as Egypt and South Africa, and then the Far East Command and Canada. But I guess we'll take a look at Egypt. Egypt has a lot of infantry and ground units. They have a little bit of an air force, but not too much. They don't even have a navy. So this just goes to show you some of the British vassals have to rely on the British Navy to support them. So that's another way that they can connect. So that way, if you're playing the UK and Germany all of a sudden decides to attack South Africa down here, from their colony, which is an unrealistic scenario, but let's just say they did, you have to say, oh no, I have to bring this light cruiser down from Nigeria to back them up so we don't lose Cape Town. But if you do, there's your scenario. And the way you have it broken up is like the British colonies over here are obviously controlled by the mainland. The Sudan colonies and the Middle Eastern colonies, as well as British Somaliland, are all administrated by Egypt. So when you play as Egypt, it will have all the territories under that role. So keep that in mind. For South Africa, it's the same story. Up to Tanzania, I can't read that. So that's Africa. Now let's take it over to Asia. Now in Asia, we have the Far East Command. One of the closest, I'd like to say, one of the closest vassals to the UK. You see here it has a different roundel. But it has the same pieces. And the way I have it, it's they have different piece boxes, but they're the same color. So that way, again, another way to show that they're the same country. That they're a part of the same country, like they're all linked together. But this one doesn't necessarily rely on the UK as much, like Egypt, South Africa, and Canada do. Far East Command is a way to... The Far East Command is kind of like... What would be the best way to put this? The Far East Command is a good way to show that some British vassals during the war didn't need to rely on Britain as much. Although they did still need to rely on each other, of course. But they didn't need to rely on each other as much. Oh, excuse me. The Far East Command has its own navy. Got 2 destroyers, I believe. One protecting Calcutta, the capital. One down here protecting Singapore. And something you may not see, but they do own Hong Kong. So when you play as... Oh! Pardon me. The camera's deciding not to cooperate. But if you are using my rules, mine are, I believe, are much simpler. But if you are using my rules, then keep in mind they do own Hong Kong, which is a very important position for the UK. And with that covered, I believe we can move on to France. Camera over Europe. Now France here is difficult to explain because all of you who play a global war and all of you don't play global war but do know World War II. If you know World War II, then you know France fell earlier in the war. It fell in mid to late 1940. I don't know the exact date they surrendered, but they did surrender in that year. And they were split up into the French occupied zone, which consisted of the city of Paris and these northern territories, and Vichy France with this little island right here, Corsica, I believe it's called, is not really the best way to defend. It's not part of the French heartland, but it's still a part of France, so you still want to defend it. But that's not my point here. My point for France is, for France, you want to, you can try and fight the Germans, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's not really a good way to go. I did, however, have one outcome where World War II did start, and France alone took Munich and Berlin by itself. No British forces involved. Well, I believe the British forces did land in Western Germany, but that's besides the point. The point I want to show you is not the capital, but the colonies. France, I believe it has a big excuse me. I'm not the best at speaking, but what I'm trying to say here, France is, I believe, in third place for having one of the biggest empires on the map currently. But that can change when Vichy France shows up. But there is something you have to know. If you're playing with my rules, you're for sure going to get these 3 territories. All the other territories are... All the other territories in Africa are not really going to make it, but they can. Syria and Madagascar are the most likely out of the 2 that can make it for colonies. French Guiana is going to become British controlled by that point, and Vietnam just goes to Germany and then to Japan later. But France is not a good player. It's not a good place to defend. That's my point I'm trying to make here. They do have a lot of land, but they can't defend it too well. That being said, that's the last Allied player. Now let's move on to the Axis powers. Okay, Germany appeared first. So Germany, being the first Axis player we're going to look at, I just want to mention the Zeppelin aircraft. Not a professionally made one, but it does exist. Back to the map, Germany does not have a lot of starting units. Like you look here, they only got 1 guy in Munich. They do have a lot in Western Germany, so you could move a couple of guys down here after you do the Blitz up here. But they got a lot. They don't start out with a lot. So they got 1 battleship right here. They got 1 guy in East Prussia. You have a couple of guys right here, but that's not a lot. And like I showed you earlier, they have a little colony in Antarctica, but you can't do nothing with that. It's not gonna... Even if you could attack with it, it's just not gonna last long. Like, it's not gonna last long at all. But what you can do, what Germany would tend to do, is gain the German land. Like, that's what they tend to do. So Sudetenland and Austria would definitely be given to the Germans in the first few rounds. Like, definitely by 1939, by 1938, they would definitely have those lands. Slovakia, you wouldn't annex, but it would be normal territory. It would still be pro-Axis, though. Poland, on the other hand, is... let's go ahead and discuss Poland. Poland is difficult to explain because they're pro-allies. They're pro-allies, but they are, they can be invaded by the Russians and they can't do anything. The allies can't do anything because... A rule that I have is no war until 1939. There's an exception with Japan that we'll get to in just a moment. But that's Germany. Let's move just a little bit southward here. Look at Italy. Italy is interesting because Italy is one of the most ambitious countries of the Axis powers. It's one of the more ambitious ones that, like, they want to take over land. And here, I'll show you the land that they have to start out with. That's their European land. They have Libya, and they've got Eritrea and Italian Somaliland. And considering that you would win the battle in Abinisia in the first round, you would have that, and you can unite them all into East Africa. Not much to say about Italy, but really, there's not a lot to talk about. There's really not a lot to talk about when talking about Italy, other than they're ambitious and they don't know what they're doing. Because look, they don't have a lot of starting units. Like, they got 1 guy in Tripoli. And they got one Air Force, and they got one dude in Corfu, and then they got this little battleship off the coast. And again, they don't have much in Africa, but East Africa, but that's enough to take out Indonesia, but that's also enough to lose to Sudan, British-controlled territory. So expect for playing as Italy, like just expect them to be not the best to play as, but you got to build up their military. Moving on, Japan got their capital city upside down. Well, don't want to stay up. But Japan doesn't focus on the mainland as much since it's pretty impenetrable with its line. They don't have a lot of starting land, like Britain and France, and heck, even Italy does. They do have a bunch of islands, and they have a little bit of a navy, but that's it. One of the events that is probably going to happen in either 1937 or 1938 will be the invasion of China that will lead to the two Chinas uniting. I'll discuss that when I discuss the Chinese. Going back to Europe, for the last time, we're looking at countries. We're going to talk about the USSR for a second. The USSR has a lot of land, like, it's the largest country in the game, but they don't have a lot of guys. Like, literally, this is all they have for Europe. All they have. And Germany is probably going to invade. Considering you're being the USSR player, you're going to expect a German invasion. You're going to expect a German invasion. Like, it's going to be inevitable. It's going to happen. And all you want to do is just build up as much as you can and fall back to, like, a defensive line. And just listen to this. A defensive line is a good thing for any country, not just for the USSR. But it would be a good thing to do. Like, create a fallback line and then build up your military right there and then attack. Like, push them out. Let them take some land to think they're winning. But then you can attack and push them back and cost them a lot. Let's move over, I guess. Let's take a look at the Pacific here for the Russians, or the USSR. Again, they have 2 infantry in the Pacific. I mean, what are you going to do with 2 infantry, an aircraft carrier, a mechanized infantry, and a light tank? What are you going to do with those? Like, seriously, what are you going to do with those against Japan? So, it's just best not to go to war with Japan. That being said, this is a good time to transition to China. Looking at China, there's a lot to talk about for China, but I'm going to try and summarize it so that way I get some time to talk about some of the events that are going to happen in the game, like that are destined to happen and stuff like that. China, you may see these. There are 2 types of Chinas in this game. You got Communist China and Democratic China. This roundel right here is pro-China KMT. This is pro-CCP. You may be wondering why they're not on every territory like this one and this country. The reason they're not on there is because those Chinese have to roll, those 2 Chinese countries have to roll for them. Like, they have to roll dice for them. Say, oh, I got this. Like, whoever gets more gets that country. Gets the entire country. Like this one right here with multiple territories. Whoever rolls will get that one as a pro country, and that will happen in the beginning of the game. Like, before you start playing, you just say, hey, we gotta roll for this. If you use my rule set. Now, let's take a look at the past player, Anzac. Now, Anzac was actually in the British Commonwealth and relied on them heavily not to get invaded, But in this, they have their own country. In this sort of scenario, they can still do business with Britain, but they're aligned with China and the USSR to even it out. What I would do if I was Australia, I would build up my navy a little bit. Because look at this. You got one battleship, one cruiser, one aircraft carrier with 2 bombers on that were on it. And you don't got much on land because you're not really gonna have to worry about land a lot. But you would wanna protect it. So you would want to build up some kind of army. And heck, if you want to, you can send it other places while you're waiting, but don't get too ambitious. That concludes the first portion of this video, talking about the countries. Let's go back to the rule book and read some more. If Japan declares war on any Chinese state, all Chinese states except for Tibet will become nationalists. This does not draw the Comintern into a war with Japan. The entire Comintern, here, let's look at this. The Comintern consists of the USSR, China, and ANZAC to kind of even it out. So the Comintern has a standing chance. Any war with a neutral, and this is important, any war with a neutral nation does not draw the rest of your team into a conflict. So here, let's go look at diplomacy for a second. Let's go look at the big diplomacy chart. So let's say like Hungary. If Hungary goes to war, let's say, I don't know, the Russians somehow invade Poland and Romania and Slovakia, and they decide to go after Hungary, and they're fully aligned. And if Hungary is fully aligned with Germany, then that will mean they won't get dropped. Then they won't get brought into the conflict. Speaking of neutral countries, let's take a look at them real quick. I'll explain the diplomacy chart here real quick. The whole diplomacy chart, the goal of it is to align countries with yourself. So, in my eyes, this is to give you something to do while you're waiting. Not just to build up your army for the war, but you can also do this. You can see some on here are already started. Some have already been, 2 of them have already been completed. And some are further along than others, like Japan with Siam. And some are just locked in neutrals, but they can be, you can try, like, what I mean by locked in neutrals, like they're locked in, like they're neutrals, and no one is aligned with them yet. But the ones that do have rounds on them so far are, you know, they're getting there, like they're sympathetic to that country, but they're not aligned with them. Siam is a special case. They won't enter a war, but they're aligned with Japan. Unless they get to stage 3. I guess we'll look at the shipping facility production real quick. On this, you can build anything that is shown. Let me take off these 2 things. You can build anything shown on the. You can like this. You can upgrade factories. You can. It's just for ships and facilities, like it says. But this is the Paris gun. It's a facility, but it's also a weapon. This is a special weapon because it cannot be moved, or it can be used, but it just can't be moved. Like, for example, say Germany is doing an airstrike over Paris or something, or any territories in this region. They can attack with the Paris gun. They can use it once or twice, and that's about it. Moving back, I suppose we can move on. Now, battles. Okay, let's Let's find a good example for a battle. Trying to think, where would a good battle be taking place? I don't know. So, here, let me grab all these units. It's really difficult to do this with one hand, but I suppose I can do it. Go for it. So, what these two things are the battle wards. These are going to become important in the game. What the battle wards do are when one country attacks another, they put all the guys in their territories, the two territories that are attacking each other. They put all their units in whoever's attacking, put it on the attacking side, obviously, and defender do the same. And then their numbers here at the bottom of each board tell you what number you have to get to take out that specific unit. So here, let me show you. Well, here, I'm going to show you a battle. So, here, let's move it back. The defenders, which are in the black, got 8. The attackers in the red got 6. So let's move back over here. So the defenders can take out... They can take out one unit only, so I guess we'll take out the tactical bomber. You can choose, depending on if you have it. The attackers got 6, so they can... We'll take out one Polish troop. And we'll roll again. I'll roll so you guys can see. Defenders got 7, and the attackers got 8. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the defenders can take out... I suppose they'll take out this tank, and attackers took out their infantry. There's only one German infantry left. Now here's the point where you can spend money to resurrect your tank and aircraft, as well as to get some occupation troops, which are just normal infantry, but... And then, one more thing to know about battles is that as Germany, you would place your roundel there. You would keep doing battles until you got up to here, like this line. And you would keep going. And that would be and all that land you'd gain, that would be your land. Like you get from Poland, and USSR would get the rest, depending on the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Now moving on, guess we'll take a look at the Italian campaign in Ibanezia. I guess we'll take a little second. So essentially, the Ibanesians are controlled by the French, and Italians are obviously Italians. They'd attack, get the territory. Not too much to worry about there, but you can pause and read some extra information on the stuff. Chinese Civil War, I've already discussed that. Vichy France. I've already talked about that. The Navy of France gets split. France doesn't have much of a starting navy. But I guess I'll show you. I don't have a 12-sided dice, so I guess we'll just use 2 dice. So I'll show you what would happen if France had more of a navy. So 1 through 3 would join the Allies. Becomes Free French. 4 through 6 removed from the game. 7 through 10 remains Vichy French. Move to the sea zone beside nearest Vichy controlled land zone. And last one will become German. So let's see what would happen. So we got 7. So it would remain a Vichy battleship. And you have like a very low chance of it becoming a Free French battleship. So that's why it's good to build up at the beginning. Moving past this, I have my little key for new players that I bring in. Now we're going to talk about some of the stuff, optional stuff. Okay, the Spanish Civil War. The Spanish Civil War is complicated because you're using the same guys, and Spain becomes controlled by the player who... So, nationalist Spain is controlled by Germany, and Republican Spain is controlled by the USSR. Being in their respective factions, as shown by the map, there's Republican Spain. Nationalist Spain would be up here, but I got Minyang Roundel in its place. Back to the war. So it's just going to be battles, and you wouldn't lose guys, they would just change sides. But here's the interesting thing that I've made up. The Allies can get involved. I believe in the HPG rules, they can get involved as well. But in this, essentially what would happen is Portugal would take these two territories. There's a roundel that I have where they would become Allied controlled. They cannot take any territories, and the territories down here would become divided. These two would become British. This would become French, and that would become Italian. Obviously, Italy's not an allied country, but they are in that sort of... I just took it because, let's just say the nationalists fled there. That's the reason. Oil wars. Here's a good one. Oil wars happens between Saudi Arabia, pro-Allies, and Iraq, pro-Axis. So they'll compete to sell these, which are oil, and they have oil rigs. The more oil rigs you have, the more oil you produce. So every round they'll produce one from each. They'll produce one from each rig, and sometimes you can have, or Venezuela can get involved, becoming a neutral one, unless they get invaded, which then the oil rig will be controlled by them. Romania can also get involved if your group decides to do that. You can also produce oil in Kuwait if you choose to do so. So that's just the base. Like, Saudi Arabia and Iraq are just the base two countries, but you can expand it. You can expand it to Venezuela or Kuwait, or even Romania can produce oil. So that's oil wars. Winter War. Winter War is a war between not Iraq, but Finland and USSR. Let me go right onto here, to the other side of my table, to where you can see it better. So yeah, they do a war if the USSR takes Viipuri, then the war's over and Finland does become pro-Axis and joins the Axis in the game. But if Finland can take Leningrad, they gain Karelia and Musenmark, and they'd actually become pro-allies. So there's two different outcomes, and they'll both go back to war in 1942, but oh, and I forgot to mention, the first time they'll go to war is in 1940. They'll go to war anyways, but if you don't have, if I don't use Winter War in a game, then it just becomes, and you do a dice roll and see who wins, and you say, oh, USSR wins, they get the territory. But if you're not using, like, pieces, then, yeah, that'll happen. Turkey at war. I guess this is the final expansion I'll talk about, and then I'll kind of round it out here with some of the stuff I did not discuss. Turkey at war. Every country is gonna, at the end of every round, all three alliances are gonna roll for Turkey. They're going to roll a dice if they get, and they'll keep on doing dice until two alliances say, alright, I give up, I don't want Turkey anymore. So that's one. And Turkey becomes, and you can decide whichever country it controls. in your faction, so you could get China controlling Turkey, or you could probably get America or Canada even getting Turkey. So that's Turkey at war. I believe that's it for the main rule set. I guess we'll take a look at these and then I'll wrap it up here. This is the IPP chart. It's how you keep track of your income and your money and stuff. You also got technology chart. I believe I'm going to do it. You roll for technology with 2 dice. And if you don't like what you got, you get improved shipyards, or you can say if you don't want one technology, you pick a technology you don't want, take it out, and then you'll have improved shipyards as your one. Or if you just don't want improved shipyards, you can do it like that. And that's it. That is the rules, except for one surprise rule right there. But that's for the game. And that's it. For the rules, I guess I'll close the book and I'll get this video uploaded to YouTube.